What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here. Welcome to our daily show where we cover everything going on here in our country on a daily basis. We got lots of stuff going on here. We'll cover here two different judges here in the United States. One comes down with a major ruling banning abortion pills, which could effectively put a nationwide abortion ban nationwide into effect. And another judge right after comes out with an opposite ruling. I'll give you the details here on that here in this video because this is nationwide put into effect here. We'll go over that here in this video. Also, President Biden considering cracking down on gas cars after stripping electric vehicles of tax credits. Biden previously said, quote, "The future of the auto industry is electric." We are seeing a lot or almost all the auto industry manufacturers switch to at least partially electric vehicles. We are starting to see more and more of these car manufacturers go electric, at least in some form here going forward. I don't know if our electric grid can handle it, but we are seeing this. You can see this, for example. You can see here Mercedes-Benz prepares to go all electric. I mean, Mercedes-Benz, obviously a massive brand, not only in the US, but all worldwide as well. Mercedes-Benz says that all newly launched architectures will be electric only from 2025 onwards. I mean, we'll see if they change their mind or something, but this is only 2 years away. 2 years away. In 2025, Mercedes-Benz will launch 3 electric-only architectures and will be ready to go all electric at the end of the decade where market conditions allow. You can let me know your thoughts on that. Even like Chevy, Chevy's EVs, all sorts of EVs here. You can see their lists of EVs, all sorts of them. SUVs, trucks, cars. Same thing with Ford. Ford EVs. You know, they got this Mustang Mach EV, Ford truck EVs touting this $7,500 in potential federal tax credits. So these car manufacturers, literally from home and abroad, all switching to at least partially electric vehicles more and more as the months and years are going by. And you can see this big headline here. The EPA reportedly planning to announce significant limits on tailpipe emissions to boost electric vehicle adoptions. The EPA is reportedly preparing to announce significant limits on tailpipe emissions this upcoming week here. The new limits would require as much as 67% of all new vehicles sold in the US by 2032 to be all electric cars. EPA Administrator Michael Reagan is expected to make the announcement in Detroit on Wednesday. The proposed limits would be the US's most aggressive climate regulations to date, and thus would create a host of challenges for automakers and would make them have to reduce tailpipe emissions by 67%. Now, the problems that I see from this from a somewhat neutral point of view, I try to be neutral and try to just see things from a realistic point of view, is that one, the limits on battery production, I see a significant limitation on that, and the demand for lithium, I see that. Number two is that we don't have quite the charging infrastructure or the power grid capacity. We see significant power grid capacity limitations, especially in states like California and Texas. We already have power grid problems there. Imagine if they all of a sudden want tens of millions of more cars in electric. Okay. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section, but we would need a significant power grid upgrade in every single state across the board. I'm not saying we couldn't do that, But we would literally need it like now. They would have to start doing this now. Okay. Remember, Texas has their own power grid basically segregated off of the board. And they've been trying to do this for years and they're still having issues. So is California. Okay. Other states are as well. But obviously, those are two of the, well, California is the biggest state population wise, Texas right up there. Um, and I mean, there's just significant problems with this. So you can let me know your thoughts on this, but we're not ready for this. We're not ready for this. Not on a large scale like this. I think there's only like 1% of the cars on the road are like EVs or less than that. So if they're not talking about producing the mass amounts of the new cars being EVs, we don't have the amount. I mean, you can't go to every single gas station right now and charge your car as an EV. Okay. Now, that's a problem having every single gas station retrofitted. They could do this, but obviously we would need significant changes. Okay, let me know your thoughts on this. The other problem with this is in the wintertime, there's this, for all the northern states, there's a significant reduction in battery range. They're saying like up to 40% of your range is uh, limited or decreased in the wintertime for anybody that would be in cold weather. And honestly, this is just kind of true. Anybody that uses like anything battery wise in the wintertime in the cold weather knows this. Batteries just don't hold charge as well in the wintertime. So you guys can let me know your thoughts on this. We'll cover this more here as we get more news here in the upcoming days. So make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. Click the bell icon. It's completely free to do so. I'll keep you up to date here. We got more coming up here. Check this out. Okay, a federal judge suspends the FDA abortion pill approval. Gives the Biden administration time to appeal. A federal judge in Texas, obviously a widely Republican state, suspends the FDA's approval of the abortion pill mifepristone. Okay, but minutes after the Texas decision was announced, a federal judge in Washington State issued a preliminary injunction that said essentially the opposite. And this is where, like, we have such a divided country, basically, essentially 50% Republicans, 50% Democrats, and the country's just so different. You look at the Senate here, like right now we have 51 Democrats, 49 Republicans. The term before that, we had 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans in the Senate. So you can see we're basically kind of half and half, right? Two completely different decisions here. The seemingly conflicting federal court rulings out of Texas and Washington state means the Supreme Court may ultimately weigh in on the legality of this abortion drug, mifepristone, in the U.S., which was approved by the FDA more than 2 decades ago in 2000. But it's this Texas ruling that might take the FDA's approval and suspend it. Take a listen to Congresswoman AOC, who explains this and what this means for the country going forward and why this could mean a nationwide abortion ban. Take a listen here.
Now let's speak with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York. Thank you for joining us on this holiday Sunday. The abortion pill ruling doesn't take effect for 7 days. You just heard me discussing that with Javier Becerra. The Biden administration is appealing it. Are you satisfied with what you just heard? And what would it mean for women if approval for this pill is revoked nationwide?
Well, I do, while I commend the Biden administration for appealing the decision, and I believe that Secretary Becerra has been doing a phenomenal job in his role, I do think that when it comes to gaming out what the very real possibilities are in the coming days, weeks, and months, this is not just about speculation, but this is about preparation. And the reality of our courts right now is very disturbing. This ruling is an extreme abuse of power. It is an extraordinary example of judicial overreach. The grounds of the ruling are just completely discredited and without grounds. And what we also learned this week is that a Supreme Court justice of this court has been receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gifts and expenses and having lifestyle subsidies by a billionaire who has been funding the same types of judicial organizations that appointed this judge in a partisan ruling in the first place.
I'm going to get to that in a second. I just want to stick with abortion first. And what you just heard me ask the secretary about was something that you called on the Biden administration to do, which is just to simply ignore the court ruling. That's a pretty stunning position if you think about it in the abstract, about the notion of just ignoring a judge's position. So my question is, when this case is resolved by the Supreme Court, should the administration follow that decision if that decision ends up banning this abortion drug?
Well, you know, I want to take a step back and dig into the grounds around ignoring this preliminary ruling as well. There is an extraordinary amount of precedent for this. There is a term known as agency non-acquiescence. And this has been used, and for folks saying this is a first, that this is precedent setting, it is not. The Trump administration also did this very thing, but also it has happened before. The idea of consistency in governance until there is a higher court ruling is not an unprecedented thing to happen. In fact, when the Trump administration did it, it was arguably through a much, a very grave issue when it came to DACA. The Trump administration was ordered to fully reinstate DACA, the DACA program, and they, in a complete defiance, did not do that. They rely on, the courts rely on the legitimacy of their rulings. And when they make a mockery of our system, a mockery of our democracy, and a mockery of our law, as what we just saw happen in this mifepristone ruling, then I believe that the executive branch, and we know that the executive branch has an enforcement discretion, especially in light of a contradicting ruling coming out of Washington.
Should that apply if the Supreme Court upholds the Texas judge's decision?
You know, I think one of the things that we need to examine is the grounds of that ruling. But I do not believe that the courts have the authority to have the authority over the FDA that they just asserted. And I do believe that it creates a crisis. Should the Supreme Court do that, it would essentially institute a national abortion ban, because you have an extraordinary amount of states who have implemented surgical bans or bans after very early time periods. And then if you pair that with a mifepristone ban, then we will essentially have a ban on abortion. There are certain workarounds. I will admit there would be certain workarounds, but we would have taken a very significant step towards a national abortion ban. Once you ban medication abortion, which represents, or start banning medication abortion, which represents the overwhelming number of abortions in the United States, then we are in extremely dangerous territory. And I would urge the Supreme Court, in its lawlessness that they are exhibiting right now already, their extraordinary conflict of interest, I mean, my hope would be that we do not get to that point. But if we do, I do believe that we must start to push back on our system of checks and balances, which is designed to push back on should there be an example of judicial tyranny and judicial overreach.
Let's talk more about the Supreme Court and what you mentioned before, which is that Justice Clarence Thomas, you want him to be impeached after a new ProPublica report this week revealed that he accepted luxury vacations from a Republican billionaire donor without disclosing them. Thomas is now defending himself, and here's what he's saying. He's saying, quote, "Early in my tenure at the court, I sought guidance from my colleagues and others in the judiciary and was advised that this sort of personal hospitality from close personal friends who did not have business before the court was not reportable, rather." What is your response?
I think that his own statement contradicts contradicts many of the facts on the ground and also raises in other ways even more serious questions. Later on in his statement, he stated that the reason and the rationale for this exemption was personal hospitality from an old friend. And he said himself in his statement, a friend of 25 years. Justice Thomas has been on the court for 30 years. And so to say what he is admitting in his statement in an attempt to defend himself is that he began this relationship with a billionaire and receiving these sorts of gifts as after he was appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States. I think that that in and of itself indicates a very, very serious problem. And then on top of that, he is now implicating his colleagues. And I do believe that Chief Justice John Roberts must now come forward and state if he allows and is allowing this kind of very serious corruption to happen on this court. I think, when it comes to Justice Thomas's statement, when he's talking about his colleagues and when he's talking about who advised him to break the law, I think we need to know who those people are.
Did the Justice Department investigate?
I mean, I believe what we're seeing right now is a breaking of the law, and we have to examine what institutions. I know that there are calls for Chief Justice Roberts to initiate an investigation. I do not think that this court any longer has the legitimacy, especially after the Supreme Court leak last year, which never came to a conclusion because the investigation itself that Chief Justice Roberts started back then, I believe is very discredited by naming a position that has an inherent conflict of interest because it is employed by those justices to pursue that investigation. I believe that and it is the House's responsibility to pursue that investigation in the form of impeachment.
Well, let me ask you, I mean, you know full well that the House is now run by Republicans. How are you going to move what you're calling for, articles of impeachment, through a House that is run by Republicans?
Yeah, I think there is the question of the politics of what we are doing, and there's the question of the course and the accountability and the structures of what we are doing. I admit it is very difficult to see a path in a Republican Party that refuses to hold itself accountable and, in fact, breaches the law itself. For all of their talk of a crime wave and Republicans talking about crime waves across the country, the crime wave is within the Republican Party. It is within all of what we are seeing. We are seeing breaking of the law by conservative members of the court. We are seeing a former president of the United States just indicted in recent days. I mean, we need to hold our systems accountable.
Yeah, so, some strong words there from AOC. I don't think the Republicans are going to investigate the Republican Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas there. You can let me know your thoughts on that. The other problem here is that with this potential nationwide abortion ban, this will also affect women with miscarriages. My wife had a miscarriage, and that affects women with that because I'll have my wife here on the show, and maybe she can talk about that here in an upcoming episode. But women are given those prescriptions when they have miscarriages because that can be a life-threatening issue for that. If everything doesn't come out afterwards, which my wife had that issue, and she had to go in to see a doctor afterwards. She was prescribed that stuff after a miscarriage, and that can be life-threatening. Women can die from that. Women do die from that. So we're breaching on very life-threatening issues for women here if this type of stuff is banned nationwide, and it's already banned in a lot of states, and a lot of people don't really think about or notice or even know about all these issues here. And we're already starting to get on very shaky grounds here that a lot of people just they only see black and white, and they don't really think about all the middle ground issues here that affect a lot of women. And you know, a lot of people are trying to put themselves in everybody else's shoes, and everybody else's shoes. It's tough for other people to make decisions for other people's bodies. I'm not. I don't want to make decisions for other people. You can let me know your thoughts here in the comments, but it seems like that's what the United States is doing here on a lot of issues. So let me know your thoughts here in the comments. I'll keep you up to date here with everything going on here in our country on a daily basis. A lot of issues being decided here right now. So if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe down below. Click the bell icon. I'll keep you up to date here with all these things going on here. There's a lot going on here. Here's some videos you should watch next. There was a nuclear warning sent to Americans. You can click on that video here. And treason was committed in the United States. So click on one of those videos next. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. And I hope you had a happy Easter weekend.